Hello, my name's... I'm just going to wait for this ambulance. Nottingham. Hello, my name's Jasper, you're watching Buckle Up, and this is a 2004 Audi A3. Although it might not be quite as dull as it first looks. Let's find out why. One of the first clues is at the front of the car, where this is on 17-inch alloys at the moment, but if it weren't winter, it would be riding on 18-inch alloys, which are, on this kind of car, pretty massive. A second clue as to why this might not be quite your bog standard Audi A3 is this Quattro badge here on the front grille. Now, a lot of Audi A3s do happen to have Quattro four-wheel drive systems, but when we get to the back, you'll see why this one may be a little bit different. Other than those badges at the front, it's a pretty dull design, if I'm honest. It's showing its age by this stage. It's a much smoother design than A3s of modern eras show. As we move round to the side, you can see what is a pretty standard three-door Audi A3 from the generation that this is. Nothing spectacular to mention at the side here at all, really. It's very simple and pretty understated. You can also see that this is from the era before the side repeater indicator was placed onto the wing mirror, and again, even the 17-inch alloys look pretty big on this car. The styling is actually very simple, with only one defined line going from the front of the car to the back, and that is this one running through the quarter panel at the front, below the window line of the door, and all the way back through to the rear tail lights. The rest of the car displays what we do know as the Audi A3 shape, but in its kind of infancy, because this is the first generation where it started to look a lot more like the modern car instead of the previous generation's slightly awkward styling. Now here at the back we begin to see some other signs that this may not be quite a standard A3. The first of which is the dual chrome exhaust tips, and the second of which I've now realised, having got to the back of this particular car, would be a badge that's here, but this one's been debadged. If this hadn't been debadged, here it would say A3, and then over here it would say 3.2 Quattro, and that really is what makes this particular A3 a little bit different from your bog standard one from this era. It has the 3.2 litre VR6 engine that produces in this model around 230 something brake horsepower. Styling wise at the rear though, it's very bland. It's a very smooth design. This being the three-door model, it does curve away nicely at the rear of the roof, unlike the Sportback models or five-door models from this era. The rear screen has quite a rake on it, and the boot is quite slab-sided now. This, in comparison to some modern cars, does seem like not lazy styling, but just a lack of styling, because there are very few defining lines or features at all on it. If I'm honest though, the entire outside of this car is pretty unremarkable. Let's have a look at the interior to see if that is also the case. The boot on this generation of A3 is 350 litres in capacity, and that is perfectly comparable to a Golf of a similar age, and it's a very usable space. It's got beautifully square sides and it goes quite a way back. While there is a load lip, there isn't too much of a load lip here, so it's quite a boxy space, which means that it's actually pretty practical. Now this model has the parcel shelf, which has an integrated sun visor on it, so if it's a very sunny day you can pop this up to prevent glare coming through the back of the car. Not really sure why you'd want that on an Audi A3. It's more common on kind of luxury cars. We'll just ignore all of my filming gear in the back here. If we get in the cabin, we find ourselves in really quite a well put together environment. The material choices within are generally pretty good. The dash is squidgy, and everything you touch above kind of your knees is pretty nice. The steering wheel in this, being the S-Line variant, is quite a nice perforated leather. The gear knob, again covered in perforated leather, and these seats are a leather and fabric mixture. The front seat does also have Isofix points at the bottom of it. The door cards, again, pretty good materials. It's only when you get down to these grab handles that things start to get a little bit less nice to touch. The door cards in particular at the lower edges, they do feel quite plasticky, although you've got large door bins down here, as well as a small kind of cubby in front of the gear selector and a single cup holder there. Other bits of storage, you've got a center armrest which has a reasonable amount of space in it, and underneath here there is another cubby which has a second cup holder in it here. Now, getting in and out of the back is not as easy as you'd hope, because the lever on the side of the front seat only tips the backrest forwards. You still have to reach down and pull the seat movement lever to actually allow you to open up a bit more space and get back in here. However, once you're back here, it's not too bad. There's a reasonable amount of space. There's certainly quite a lot of width to the car, and the seats are comfortable and they do hold you quite nicely. You don't sit too upright, and the materials, again, back here are pretty decent. The front seat belts have a small rail that they slide on, so this being the 3-door model, they're obviously mounted further back than would be ideal, and it has larger front doors, but the bottom of the seatbelt is able to slide forwards into a slightly better position for when it's buckled up. The interior of the car flows quite nicely from the side round into the seat back, so that means that on a longer journey you'll be able to kind of snuggle up into the corner and find somewhere comfortable. I'm switching to this camera because the rain's just got a lot worse and I don't particularly want to get any more wet, and I don't want my camera to get any more wet. Continuing the interior of this car, the infotainment system that this one has, infotainment if you can call it that, is the Audi Navigation Plus, which means that it's actually got a decent sized screen on it. This is from the era when, if you had sat-nav, it came with a DVD with the maps on it. To access that, you push this button and the screen actually folds out, allowing you to put the DVD for the navigation in, and also there are 2 SD card slots which should allow you to play music. The Audi A3 with 3.2 litre VR6 engine was available with a 6-speed manual transmission or a 6-speed DSG automatic transmission. That is what this particular car has, so it really makes driving this car an effortless process. It is showing its age because obviously this car now is getting on for 17 years old, but it stacks up pretty well. It definitely feels pretty well screwed together, although I must say when you drive and go over bumps you do get a little bit of rattling from, say, the door cards and something towards the rear of the car, though I suspect that may well be the airbox which is down here, because of course the owner of this has put an induction kit on it. Shall we go for a bit of a drive? I must say that the stock exhaust on this does produce quite a nice, subtle engine note. It's not shouty, but it does have quite a nice tone to it. If I come to a stop and then take my foot off the brake, the DSG begins to creep, and when you then put your foot down, you do start moving, which is quite a slow, steady kind of set off. If you do want to get moving a little bit quicker when you have stopped, and if you then allow it to creep and put your foot down, you get a bit of a jerk as the power comes on. Visibility to the side is good because the B-pillar is set quite far back, so that means that junctions like this where you're pulling out at an awkward angle, it doesn't actually impact your vision too much. I've still not quite got the gentleness that you need to, well, no. The DSG gearbox just means that you can't set off smoothly and quickly, which is a little bit frustrating. The steering wheel definitely feels good, and I must say that generally the driving experience is pretty good. However, the suspension is quite firm, and a lot of that is down to how much the engine weighs and how far forwards it's mounted, because what that means is you've got a lot of weight hanging over, in fact in front of the front wheels. So that does kind of mean the front end of this car needs to be quite stiffly sprung, and that does ruin the ride a bit. On, well, British roads, it's certainly a little bit uncomfortable and jolty. You are constantly aware that all you need to do is flex your right foot, the gearbox kicks down, and then you suddenly find yourself hurtling forwards at a license-losing speed if you aren't careful. But if you don't flex your foot, you're able to just creep along in pretty good comfort and in quite a subtle vehicle. The noisiest thing is probably the tyres at lower speeds, and then you get some crashing from the suspension as well, of course. And that's 30. The VR6 does sound beautifully smooth when you rev it, and it is it's a very good engine. It's the same engine that's in the Golf R32 from this era, and it is a pretty reliable one. It will easily do, you know, a couple of 100,000 miles without too much complaining. Once you're moving, the DSG allows you to make incredibly swift progress, just seamlessly working away in the background without you really knowing it's changing gear. The only indication really is a drop in the revs. You can sometimes feel the shift very slightly depending on the speed you're going and how much power you're putting down, but generally if you're driving quite gently and softly, you will not feel the gearbox changing at all. Firm suspension though, very firm suspension. Why is this road at 20? Nothing on it, apart from these bloody speed bumps. Yeah, the suspension in this is firm. It is quite a harsh ride, so if you like a bit of comfort as you're driving, probably wouldn't recommend this, to be honest. It is just an effortless drive though. It's so easy to just make such fast progress. You don't have to think about gears at all. The steering's pretty decent, and you have two pedals. That's all. You just do your checks, put your foot down, and away you go. If you enjoy your sporty driving though, I'd try and get one of these with the manual, because this engine coupled with a manual gearbox would be beautiful. You just have to flex your foot and you suddenly find yourself hurtling forwards. And that engine note, as it just begins to kind of bring the power through, is so nice to hear. The brakes are good as well, and they should be, because the size of the rotors on the front of this thing, they are huge. They're vented discs, and if you look at the clearance between those brake discs and the 17-inch alloys that are on this, there is not much there at all. Third, fourth, fifth, and I'm not even doing sixth, and I'm not doing 30 miles an hour yet. Doing about 1200 revs, and I'm in sixth, and I'm doing 30 miles an hour. While the engine itself may not be that economical, the gearbox has certainly been tuned to try and eke out as much economy from it as you possibly can get. The generally good all-round visibility does mean that this car is quite easy to place, and it's an Audi A3 at the end of the day, so it's a pretty good all-round hatchback, just at the premium end of the market, and in this instance with a wildly uneconomical engine fitted. Let's do some more driving. So, what do I make of the Audi A3? The Audi A3 in its own right is a very good car. It's a competent hatchback, and even in this generation, as old as it may be now, it is a pretty good daily driver. Is the one with the 3.2 litre petrol VR6 engine a good daily driver? Probably not, unless you are a drug dealer or some kind of accountant who's got too much money. This is not really the kind of car you'd want to daily drive if you care about your fuel costs. That being said, this engine is a bit of a gem and is becoming somewhat of a rarity now, because not many of them were sold in the first instance, and finding one in decent condition is getting more difficult. If you can find one and you do like this kind of engine, it's definitely something to go for. One really good thing about this car is it is performance that blends in, especially if you've got a model like this which has been debadged at the back. It takes somebody who knows about their VAG products from this era to actually recognise that this is the car with the special engine. And that is quite a nice thing. The subtlety and the understatement of performance is not really something you come across with more modern cars, so finding it in this is not refreshing, but it's certainly quite good. That concludes today's video. Thank you very much for watching. Please do check out all of our social media links, which are in the description. Have a look at our merch store to get lovely merch like this, and we'll see you in the next one. I'm gonna go and sit inside now. Bye.